Hey guys, Jeff from Home Renovision here, and today we are dealing with doors and trim. I just finished trimming it out, which basically means to hang the door, add the casings. And so today's video is going to be all about how to finish from here. Like how to get the best finish possible. One of the ways that you get good return on investment when you're doing your own DIY projects is to know how to get a professional finish. So today's video, I'm going to show you brush and roll, and I'm going to show you, believe it or not, the $40 Wagner power sprayer. We're going to do both of these applications for finishing the doors and the trim so that you have options in your arsenal. The preparation and the process is different for both. I'm going to teach you all my insider tricks. I'm going to teach you which products I like to use for my caulking and for filling nail holes, all of this kind of information, all right, so that you can get a professional finish when you're doing your project. Let's just jump right into this because step number one is all about the prep. And that means we've got to take the doors off of the hinges. Now, I've got a process that I've developed over the years that works really effective for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hinge off of here and then pop the other two pins to remove the door. And then I'm going to finish removing all the hardware, okay? And when you go to install it again, you'll find that by installing it on the two hinges and then screwing the third hinge on is going to save you a ton of time. Because even when they come from a supplier like I use, if you're a fan of my channel, you know I like classic wood molding, and they do all these doors custom for me, okay? So when they arrive, they already got all the hinges in place and you just stick them together. There's always little variances and it drives you nuts trying to put it together. So if you're only installing 2 instead of 3 hinges, anyway, that's a lot to say, remove the hinges, but this is what we're gonna do. All right, so you've gotta get organized, have maybe a Ziploc bag or something, somewhere that you can put all of your screws and hardware. Okay, boom. Now we're just gonna pop the other two off. Boom. Okay, hold it from the top. All right, one down. Okay. Now when you're finishing your doors and trim, just get rid of the hinges. Don't try to be a superhero and paint around them, cover them all up in tape. This only takes seconds. And it'll make sure your job finishes perfect every time. The truth is it takes longer to put tape on than it does just to remove the hinge. Now you want to make sure that you're using, here, there's a lot of different companies make this stuff, but it's a siliconized acrylic caulking. This isn't a painter's caulking, this is for doors and windows. It's a 30-year product and it goes on really awesome. Just cut the tip on the angle, okay? And you want to do this first because this takes about an hour or so to dry, closer to 2 before you can paint, all right? So you want to get all your prep work done, get your caulking on as fast as possible. And with the hinges gone, you can do this gap right here. And if that gap is caulked, then your doors are going to look amazing at the end because you're not going to have that obvious gap behind every one of your hinges that everybody gets when they tape them on. There we go. So now we're going to get into what separates the men from the boys when it comes to your finishing work. Everywhere you have wood contacting wood, even if there's a nail in there and it's got a nice tight joint, most professional painters do not caulk this joint here on the door trim, okay? And I don't know why, because they're all guaranteed to crack at some point in time. There's always going to be expansion, contraction in a house, and those joints will always crack. Now, you don't want a lot of caulking there because you've got a door closing, right? But a good finisher will always install this trim just a millimeter away from the door. And then what you do, you want to go with that cut tip almost flat to this piece. You see there? Okay, just on a bit of an angle, and you're going to add just a little bit of material so that it fills that gap without being a huge concave mess, okay? But you're still going to want to have a little something there. This is where less is more. You're going to want to do every joint in that same manner, every joint, even these little ones around here. Don't expect the paint to solve all your problems. If there's a gap now, there'll be a gap later. And if it's your house, you can avoid the gap. Most track housing in North America is not built to look as good as it does the first day you buy it within a year, okay? They cut all kinds of corners, and this is one of the ones they cut the most. It takes a long time to do your finishing trim properly, but it is worth all the effort you put into it. You also want to just put a tiny little drip right here on this corner. Even if you glue your joints, if there's a joint here, your best bet is to use the caulking to wipe that in, okay? Just a bit of a rub. And then get rid of all the excess. Make sure you don't fill the nail holes with it either. That's not what caulking is for. Never use your caulking to fill a nail hole, because caulking shrinks a little bit when it dries, and you're gonna get a bad look. If you wanna finish this, you're gonna wanna use this product. I know it looks kind of like something like the NFL would put together, but the truth is it has a compound in here where it's pink when it's wet and then dries white. And that's how you know when to sand, okay? So, here's the system. Less is more. Take your finger, do a little dab, and fill the hole. Okay, that's it. Okay, just a little bit of product, because you don't want to have a whole lot of it sitting on here that you got to sand off. The more control you use now, the less work later. You don't want it filling up all your contour, okay, and creating bumps and ridges, and just get a little bit in that hole and then wipe it clean. So when you're prepping your project, remember, caulking first, 1 to 2 hours. Then you can do all your dry decks work, right? Then you've got time while all that is setting up to finish off setting up your floor. So you want to vacuum it out. We're going to show you how to tape it all off so you don't have overspray on your flooring. Because remember, the best way to do this kind of work is put the flooring down first, then do all your carpentry on top of it. One of the secrets to this process is paint your trim 1 coat before you install it. You'll notice that when I do the dry decks touch-ups and the caulking is white, it only needs 1 coat. The dry decks, only needs 1 coat, really. So don't be too worried about this kind of thing. If you paint it all first and you see flashing, you can always touch up the dry decks a little bit if you need to, but at least you're not going to be putting nails and that sort of thing within a couple inches of the floor. Right? So you don't have to go right to the edge of the floor with your paintbrush when you're trimming it in. You can leave that 1/4 of an inch. No one's ever going to see if it's 1 coat or 2 coat at the floor. That's not a concern, all right? Okay, so now I got to clean up a little bit, cut back some paper, and do some taping. Okay, get that out of the way. So for the purpose of the demonstration today, I'm going to be spraying this column, and I'm going to use the brush and the roller on the other side. But I'm going to show you the different ways to tape off. And here we go. What I'm doing is I'm following the line of the trim. I'm trying to tape. See that last little 1/8 of an inch? Don't care about it. For the purpose of a sprayer, you're never going to make that perfect. The point is this: when we're working with acrylic paints, you're going to want to have either some nail polish remover with acetone in it, or you can just buy a little jug of acetone at the hardware store. You're going to want to have that as a backup in case you get any overspray. And it's a good rule as a rule in general. If you're painting your house, have the acetone available. Surfaces like flooring and windows and that sort of thing, you can clean the paint off real effectively using a Q-tip and acetone. And when we're here, right, we're creating an environment here where I'm not going to wreck my flooring. Okay, I don't want to have to rely on the tarp alone for this. Well, the only time I use painter's tape is when I'm doing my trim. Bring the tarp up and around, okay, like that. And I know you're all asking, what about this little space over here? Well, we're going to cut a piece of baseboard and we're going to install it with caulking only. And then we're just going to paint it all in. And I'll show you that in just a second. Gotta make sure your paint's well shook. There we are. Lovely. So here is my suggestion for everybody out there who's working on their house. If you're going to install your trim on top of finished flooring, at the very least, paint the bottom of your trim. Okay? When you install it, you can nail on the higher surfaces. You never have to have a brush come close to the floor. If you paint your bottom of your base first, if you paint the edge of your casings first, it's just the easiest money. Now when you're painting, you want to paint with just a little bit of paint. This is not the time to try to slap it on so thick that it covers in one coat. The effective way to paint trim, okay, so that you don't get too much texture, you don't get those paint lines from the brush. Use less paint. Use 3 coats if you need to. This stuff here is going to dry in about 10 minutes and I can recoat. I'm just going to set it out to the side and recoat. Okay, and then I can cut it and install it and it's all finished. Don't have to worry about, don't paint like this on your trim. Don't go like that, okay? Look how horrible that looks. Looks like something painted from 1905 with lead in the oil, you know? It's disgusting. There's so much paint there. All right, don't do it. Now it's gonna take me a week to dry this out. So we'll set this aside, we'll let it dry, and then we're gonna cut and snap them in, and we'll move on to the next part of the prep work, because now my dry decks is all finished. I'm gonna sand it all in, and then I'm gonna vacuum it all up. Because when you're painting, dirt is your enemy. Gotta have a clean job site. Wash your brush between every use. Don't let it sit around because it'll be garbage in about 10 minutes. So this is the kind of sanding block I like to use, guys. All right, you get these at the Home Depot. They've got the angle so I can do my drywall sanding. But the coolest thing about this is, even if your sponge is worn out from prepping your room, you gotta still have good corners on these sides. You hardly ever let that touch the wall. Now you get to use the other half of the sanding sponge, so don't throw them out if the front gets destroyed. Because what we're gonna do is we're gonna set these corners in every one of these grooves, okay? Wherever we see there was dry decks. Recontour the trim. All right? So now the hole is filled, but you can't even see the hole. There's no material left on the trim. So these ones I gooped up really good just to make the point of how this works, right? We'll set that in the contour, the next contour, this little edge. Use the sponge to follow the contour. You can press it right into the contour, right? And then I got one more ridge here. Bam. Now the hole is filled and the trim looks perfect. You only get one chance to get this perfect. Okay? And perfect is what you want to start with. Because everything you do for finishing work is a lot easier if you're working with a perfect surface. There you go. So at the same time it took me to sand down my trims, this is ready to go now. We're going to cut and install this sucker. There we go. 1 5/8, 1 and just under a half. So the secret here, when you're doing this kind of work, guys, is the thickness of this trim is the same as the thickness of the casing. Depending on your wall, you might need to set it off the wall a little bit so you get that nice flush finish at the bottom. So let's stick this in here first. That's mildly proud. Interesting. All right, so I don't want to put a lot of adhesive on here, or caulking. All right, I'll just put a few dabs will do, and then one across the top. That'll squeeze out, okay? Here we go. Watch this. Squeeze it out. All right. And then we're just going to want to caulk it in place. One down. Now the reason you don't want to use nails is because with little pieces of wood, if you see the profile, a lot of times they're hollow on the back. You don't want to nail down here because then you got to touch it up and sand it, right? And you're painting close to the floor again. And if you put your nail up here, you run the risk of snapping it and it could break in half, okay? So don't use any nails on small pieces. Well, that's lunch. It's hot up here today, my goodness. We're gonna just take a quick break, let it all finish drying. Then we come back, we're gonna do all the painting. All right. I guess, last thing in the prep list, kills, right? And the reason we want this is because whenever you're dealing with like a finger joint pine or any like wood that's not MDF, you're gonna have the occasional knot or stain area. So you're gonna wanna try to preemptively strike this, right? So the trim that comes from my trim shop is all primed in advance. If there was discoloration or staining that was gonna come through, I'd see it already. And so most of this wood looks pretty darn good, but there is this one stain right here. That is a little bit of a knot. Imagine that. That's all it takes. Mission accomplished. Now, I got a bit of a drip here. I don't want the drip, so I'll clean that up. And here's the deal. On the can it says wait an hour to paint. It's good advice. They put it on there because that speaks to every condition you're working in, right? But if it's warm and it's dry, this will be good in about 10, maybe 15 minutes. So you just want to double check. As long as it doesn't wipe off, you can brush and roll or spray, so no worries. Love this stuff. All right, now we're gonna start with painting with the brush, okay? If you're a fan of the channel, you've maybe seen some of this information, but we're gonna go through it anyway. Angle brush, 3, 2.5, whatever you're more comfortable with. Paint can, get it empty to about here. Okay, you want about 1.5 inches of paint. And you load up the brush. And then you clean off the outsides, especially the trim. Okay, the more you clean, the more control you have. Now nothing's dripping, there's no mess, okay? You can work in your good clothes, and when you're done your paint job, you can go to Sunday church. Not an issue, all right? Start at the top and work your way down, okay? So you're gonna just set your brush and then drag. Okay? And the goal here is not to get a perfect finish the first time. The goal here is to get as little material as possible on there to get coverage. Okay? So you want to keep stretching it out. If you're not stretching it out, then you're leaving all the paint on the wood and you're going to get ridges. And when you go do your second coat, you'll do the same thing because that'll be your habit of painting. And you'll have too much paint. A, you're going to waste a lot of money. If you're not stretching it out and really getting good coverage, you're wasting your money. Gallon of paint nowadays, good paint like this costs 60, 70 bucks in the store, and you know it. So less is more, okay? You want to get some coverage out of this stuff. And then you work the top and you drag. Okay? Now I've been using Dulux for years. I'm very familiar with their products and I know which ones I love and which ones I hate. I also like some Sherwin-Williams stuff. I like some stuff from Benjamin Moore. I like stuff from PPG. I like stuff from Pittsburgh Paint. I like a company called C2 Paint. There's a lot of really good paints out there. What separates them from everything that's sold in the box store is quality. If you go to the box store for your paint, you're not gonna find quality. It's just the way it is. It's like every paint company out there has got their top of the line stuff, right? And then they've got their decent stuff and then their commercial and all the garbage, and they brand all the garbage and put it in the box store. Just being honest. There's no way around it. I don't care who you are. If you have a problem with my opinion on that, go ahead in the comments section, blow it up. Let's have an argument or a conversation. Let's discuss the matter civilly. But the reality is, my experience in the paint market, there's a bunch of different paint companies, just like there's a lot of different automotive makers, okay? But in the paint world, they make everything from the introductory piece of crap all the way up to the Lamborghini. And every paint company makes the same stuff. High end, all the way down to crap. Because they want to serve every market that they have walking through the door. For whatever reason, I think Benjamin Moore and C2 are the only stores that I'm really aware of that don't sell a real crap baseline. Right? They don't sell a new home construction paint product line, but almost everybody else does. So you got to be careful when you go to the store. You get what you pay for, all right? You can buy a $30 gallon of semi-gloss trim paint, and you need 2 gallons to do the same work as 1 gallon of this, because it covers so much better. 1 brush line, 3-4 feet of trim, and I cleaned it off. Think about it. There really is, you get what you pay for in the paint world. So don't be afraid to spend good money. But if you're gonna spend money, have good technique so you're not wasting your time. Because if you can paint in 1 or 2 coats what it would take 3 or 4 of a cheap paint, all right? You're buying extra material thinking you're saving on the gallon price, but using half the material with a good paint. Just saying, that's also half the time brushing, so you save a lot of time as well, all right? Now, here we go, and then we pull, all right? Here we are. And the reason I like to pull instead of go like this, because we're not curling, right? We're just putting paint on and we're just running it down, all right? Getting even distribution. The less of that slapping back and forth of the brush, the less paint is flying around the room, the less cleanup afterwards. You're gonna thank me for that. So that's how we do this. All right, we do every part of the trim that we see. All right, there we go. We get it on, get control, and then we pull. And you stretch it as far as you can. Now this is latex paint, so we start at the top and work down. If for any reason you're working with an oil, start at the bottom and pull it up. Okay, it just performs better. Now you don't have to paint in the hinges, but you don't have to be careful not to paint the hinges either. It's not gonna affect your day, okay? Just make sure you don't leave paint sitting in that crease. You don't have issues closing your door. Pull, pull, pull. This is the rule. Just keep on pulling, all right? Now, you can go up like that and leave all kinds of paint in that corner, all right? And then you can just pull from it. See that? That guarantees you fill all that crack up with the paint. When in doubt, you got a texture or something that's causing you a problem, go across grain, and then you can pull it down. Whenever you find yourself having to go back the other way in order to get coverage, it means you're running out of paint, all right? Just keep on pulling. Now my brush is nice and dry. I'm gonna go back and clean up all the extra paint that I had sitting there. Okay, now, even with the good paint and this technique of stretching it out and pulling it, you're trying to use as little amount of paint as possible to get your coverage, all right? And that's how you avoid all the brush lines. Too much paint leaves brush lines. It's like a snowplow driving down the street. All the extra just gets pushed to the side. Same with the brush, okay? So if you have too much paint and you see lines, when you see ridges like this, it means somebody used way too much material, okay? There's enough paint here to paint the rest of this trim. Way too much material. And people who paint like that are throwing their money in the garbage and getting a poor result. Okay, there's still too much material here. I'm just gonna just keep on dragging this down till I get it where I want it. Wow, I really put a lot of paint on there. But you get an idea how much coverage you can get from just a little bit of paint, right? Okay, let's talk about the bottom now. To paint the bottom, you wanna pretend you're painting a ceiling. So invert yourself and paint the same way. You get upside down, and now you start from the top and you pull the paint away. Okay, you don't even need to have tape here. You just use the tip of the brush to push it towards the edge of the wood, and then you pull it away. You're in control. Set the heel of the brush, and then pull it up. Same thing down here. You're gonna want to get right underneath the bottom with the tip. All right. So when you set the brush and then you apply pressure, you push the bristles down. You don't want to try to start at the edge, okay? Get close, push the bristles down, and then paint it. Okay? That's it. And you can paint with incredible accuracy and not even have to spend all your time taping everything up. Some people are going to argue that this is faster than using the sprayer. But next we're going to show you why I use the sprayer instead of a brush, because whenever you're painting trim, you're also painting doors. That's where having the sprayer makes the biggest difference. So give me another 2 minutes, I'll finish this up and move on to the sprayer and how that works. All right, so real quick, a lot of people are going to be asking in the comment section, what kind of brush do you use, Jeff? Because I want to use a brush that Jeff uses, and I'm like, I use every kind of brush I see. Every time I see a brush for sale I've never used, I buy it and I try it. Here's what I've learned over all my years. Whether it's $8 or $50, like the Coroma I'm working with here, they all do exactly the same job. Sorry to break anybody's bubble. I know a lot of painters get really under the collar about this. Oh, you gotta have a Purdy. If you're not using Purdy, Purdy's not the best thing in the world, okay? But it is a Lexus. It's a nice brush. But they also sell a Purdy brush at the local building store that's not the same quality as the professional Purdy brush. So how does a consumer, how are you gonna know? Do you hear, oh, Purdy's the best, and so you go to your local building store and they're selling a Purdy and you buy it? Same company, different product level, different quality level, Don't spend 30 bucks on a brush at a local building store. You're buying a $10 brush, okay? You're buying their name on a $10 brush. Pretty may not be happy about that, but maybe if they weren't trying to deceive everybody with their name on a piece of crap, I wouldn't have to tell everybody. So anyway, feel free to buy a $10 brush. Go to your local Sherwin-Williams or Dulux or Benjamin Moore. Say, hey, you got a $10 or $12 brush, that's what I'm gonna buy. I like a 3-inch angle. That's my favorite. I know lots of people who like a 2.5. That's fine too. But if you can carry a lot of paint and you paint with this technique, a 3 makes everything so much faster. And you can almost get one at the local dollar store. The value of the brush really comes down to how often you're gonna use it and how long you want it to last and how many times you can clean it without it falling apart, okay? As a homeowner, if you're just doing a couple of rooms and you wanna buy a $3 brush at the dollar store, that's fine, but the hairs are gonna come falling out while you're painting, so just pay attention to that and wipe them off as you go. And you can do a $3 brush. If you're gonna be painting a lot for the rest of your life, then invest in a brush that you can wash and let dry, and it'll have it in perfect condition day after day after day after day, and you can have a brush like this last for a couple of years. Just saying, it's worth the investment if you're gonna be using it to make money. All right, so the same can that I had here, right? I added just a touch of water. Went about 10% water, and I'm just giving it a bit of a stir now. You can't spray a semi-gloss 100% acrylic paint without adding a little bit of water. You gotta thin it out just a touch, okay? It's gonna look like junk when it hits the trim. All right. Here we go, Wagner Power Sprayer. Now, remember how much we got done with just a few brushfuls? Imagine, that's actually a lot of paint right there. When you think about it, compared to a couple of brushfuls, let's see how far this goes. Okay, so here we go. We got our paint, and we're gonna turn it on. It's gonna make a little bit of noise, and then I'm gonna show you how this works. The key here is to make sure that your flooring is all covered so you don't have overspray, okay? There we go. So here's what we're learning here, guys. And this is where experience comes in handy. That's coming out too thick. There's obviously not enough water in that mix to get a nice even spray. So I gotta brush this in now real quick before I have a mess on my hands. And we're gonna modify that so that we don't have a problem. And we're starting on the frame for a reason, because this is where you find out how your mix is working, okay? If it's too thick, you can brush it in. That's not a problem. But you want to get this fixed up before you go and attack your doors. All right, here we go. Now this is just like any other brush and roll day, eh? Not bad. Here we go. Okay, let's thin it out a little bit more and we'll try again. Okay, so first I'm going to clean out the line with the old stuff. All right, let's give this a try. So we started with 10, now I'm at 20% water, all right? All right, there we go. That's pretty much the secret. And you don't want to spray until you see full coverage. Spray until you see about 80% coverage and let the paint melt into each other, okay? It will do that. You're seeing it now, the streak, the bubbly is all going, melting into each other now. That's brilliant. All right, now it's time for the doors. We'll show you why I love having a spray gun for a door. And so for this demonstration, what we're gonna do, so I'm gonna spray the top half, all right? Actually, I'll spray the bottom half because it's easier. I don't have to bend over so much when I'm painting. And then I'm gonna brush and roll the top half, and you can get an idea of the difference in the work and in the quality of the finish. All right? Oh. For the rolling, I'm taking the full strength paint and using a mini roller, little 4-inch with a microfiber roll. Okay. I know a lot of people like to use a sponge roller when they're working with smooth surfaces, but I like to just buy a good quality paint and then let the texture melt itself out. And in this situation, with the brush and the roller, less is more. With the sprayer, you're going to find a little bit more is better. Now obviously if you're using a sprayer and you're going to resort to the Wagner power sprayer on a door, what you're going to find is that because it's blowing air with the paint, there's going to be a texture. There's going to be a little more eggshell to it. And that's fine. If that's the look you're going for, just make sure you're consistent. But if you want to have a nice smooth finish, then using a roller and stretching out your paint and going that less is more concept is going to give you a better look. Personally, I'm not a big fan of that, so I'm going to roll that in. But all I'm doing is working out the texture, okay? So you can spray the whole door and then come back and roll this all in. Nothing wrong with doing that at all. All right. Now with the rule with finish paint, a lot of doors out there are what we call 6-panel. So you're gonna have all these different squares. So you got a lot more brushing and rolling. The bigger the flat area, the smoother you want this finish texture, okay? That means the less material you want on your paint roller, all right? You'll also get a benefit if you set up a couple sawhorses and lay the slab flat so that the gravity is melting the paint together. In this situation, because it's standing up, it's all sagging. So you gotta be really careful not to use too much paint. It's always easier to do a second or a third coat if you need to and use less paint, okay? There's just never anything wrong with that. And if you find after your first or your second coat, you've got little bits of junk, okay? Grab the sanding sponge. If there's too much texture in your paint, grab the sanding sponge, okay? It's always your best interest between coats to make sure that you are completely happy. All right, and try to do three or four sides every time. Okay, a door has 6 sides. So the first time you roll, do both of the sides and across the top. Next time you turn it around, flip it upside down and roll the bottom. If you seal all the sides of the door, your doors are less likely to warp, especially if they're subjected to different levels of humidity throughout the year, okay? That'll help to keep your doors functioning properly year-round. Okay, well that's it, right? Just remember, sand in between coats, clean your surfaces, get every part of it done, and then when you screw it all back together, your hinges will be clean and everything will be perfect. That's money in the bank. Okay, so just to recap, in most cases when you're painting doors and trim, less is more, right? Always sand, always prep. There's more work that goes into a quality paint job when you're not holding the brush than when you are, right? Remember, when you're painting the inside of your house, the average home, 20 to 40 gallons of paint, ceilings, walls, trims, and doors. Do the whole inside of your house. Get 5% increase in the value of your whole house, okay? That's a lot of money. And it's not a huge investment because in a lot of cases, the paint for a whole house, you know, the ceiling paint and the wall paint, it's a lot less money than it is for the doors and trim. It's affordable. It's a DIY project you can afford to do yourself. Dress up your house, make it beautiful, and earn some money while you're at it. And if you want to see that Wagner power sprayer in action, we actually used it on another project where we painted and stained the brick at the new location of the church. Check out the video here if you haven't seen it. It's amazing because when you're spraying something with texture, a cheap sprayer like that goes a long, long way. And I would actually recommend that on brick any day of the week. Cheers to next time.